2018 saw a growing global movement to ban the use of single-use plastic straws. These little relics are non-recyclable and add to the 8 million tons of plastic dumped into our oceans every year. Locally, the Ocean Basket chain stated that it would no longer be providing their customers with straws or plastic bags with their takeaways. And local trend spotter Dion Chang weighed in on the broader impact of the social movement on the marketing industry. Maybe before we talk about why this is suddenly gaining this traction that I refer to, it might be useful to get a handle on how much damage, not only plastic straws, but plastic generally is causing.
It started last year, and especially with the David Attenborough series, I mean, even Queen Elizabeth, plastics on her radar.
This is the Blue Planet series.
Yes, the Blue Planet series. I read something really interesting. So there are 5 patches where plastic sort of assembles around the planet. The biggest one being the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and it's got 1.8 trillion pieces of plastic. And they said it's double the size of the state of Texas. That's just like this island that's forming there. So I just think there's more and more awareness of that. And when people brush it off as, oh, it's just a fad, it's just a an eco fad, I say no, not really, because I've been encountering some restaurants that have bamboo straws they give there, and I've actually been to lunch with people where the waitress would put straws down the table and everybody says no straws.
So it's a thing now?
It's a thing. Yeah. It's a definite thing.
But is it a movement, or is it a nascent movement at this time?
I wouldn't say nascent, because I think it's quite far advanced, and I think it's utmost on everybody's minds, because, like you said, it's not only the straws, but it's plastic. So it's even the microparticles of plastic that you get in face scrubs and stuff. People are saying don't use those in your showers because that also collects there. So I think there's a general global swell of people understanding that we are really, really damaging.
And what is driving the trend? What has made us suddenly come to this realization so many years on?
So linked to this no straws movement is a very big free from movement. So that's going to plant-based diets, free from glucose. Lactose.
So this is a subset.
It's a subsect, but I think it's one that really is welling up really strongly. And I think especially restaurateurs or the manufacturers of plastic need to really take note of this, because I think they underestimate the awareness in customers about that. And I think your big brands already understand that, your food and FMCG brands understand that you don't dabble around this, or you don't ignore this.
So if you're buying into the zeitgeist that you're talking about, what advantage then is it going to give a brand?
The advantage is really about brand loyalty. So we're in an era where there is no brand loyalty at all. Your product is really secondary. So what can you add onto your product to make sure that you've got that sustainability? And at Flux, we are firmly focused on Gen Z. So goodbye, millennials. We've had fun with you, but you're not on the radar
You've had
anymore.
your time.
You've had your time, and Gen Z are your teenagers, your adolescents who are coming of age. They're starting to be your entry-level workforce. They are starting to be your next customer. And those guys have a really amplified viewpoint on that, and they expect brands to have value systems, which they must be very vocal about.
So leading on from that, why would brands ignore this? What would be the peril attached to that?
So your younger customer wants a brand to have the value systems which they will resonate with, so that they will give that loyalty, but also to work for that company. So it's a two-pronged thing. You want a younger, more diverse customer base, but you also want that younger, more diverse customer base to actually come and work for your company. So it's two ways.
Do brands just let it happen, or do they have a responsibility to communicate the fact that they are doing something?
No,
they
have a very, very strong responsibility to communicate that. So you mentioned Ocean Basket, things that you have to say, this is where we stand on things. And it's a very uncomfortable conversation for businesses to have. It's always been, bottom line, keep the shareholders happy. Now you can't sit on the fence. You've got to say, this is what we stand on LGBT issues, on sustainability.
But the tonality of that communication is critical, though.
Is very, very
critical.
Because
you can't seem to be seen to be pushing it so hard that it appears inauthentic or untrue.
Yes, you've got to walk the talk. And then the irony is that the more you actually draw a line in the sand, the more you will be targeted by trolls and stuff on Twitter if you just put a step wrong. So you can ask a brand like Woolies about that. They try their best and you still get hammered. But at the end of the day, that message does come through, and it will also make a huge difference.
But the important thing to note here, and we're talking about something as innocuous as plastic straws, this is not a fad. I mean, this is something that you, as a trends analyst, you're thinking this is going to gain a lot more momentum, not just with things like that, but also with in other aspects.
In other aspects, the free-from movement. So there's a lot of people who are just understanding that we've reached a crossroads and that intersection is really busy and is really dangerous for brands, but we need to cross that bridge or the crossing there, and that's where the customers are going.
Love. For me, it's the freedom to love and to be with whom I choose.
In February 2018, Cosmopolitan magazine made history by featuring its first ever transgender cover model in the shape of American actress Laverne Cox. A landmark occasion which will hopefully ring in a new era of inclusivity and representation in the lifestyle magazine space. Let me tell you what I find worrying about this interview. The fact that it's an event, that we actually have to talk about it, that we're recognizing it, that it's a landmark. It does say something still about where society is and where it needs to go in terms of issues like this. Tell us about how the decision was made, what you needed to weigh up in this respect, because I would also suggest to you that it might offend many of your readers, that there is a risk attached to this, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, sure, you're right. There's always a risk of alienating a part of our audience, but Cosmopolitan, as a brand and a magazine globally, speaks to a millennial audience. And millennials make up over 50% of our population in South Africa. And if you look at statistics in the US, for example, 20% of millennials identify as LGBTQI. So we know and we recognise that a growing number of millennials are identifying outside of the binary. So it's important that we publish content that acknowledges that, that's representative, inclusive, progressive.
Coming up, some of the big issues that faced the media industry in 2018, and one of our guests recalls the 9/11 terror attacks in New York City.